When the courthouse clerk handed me the stamped divorce papers, everything felt strangely quiet. Months of silence had ended with signatures that carried the weight of my entire marriage. I had watched her betrayal unfold piece by piece without saying a single unnecessary word. The neighbors had seen things, the bank statements had confirmed things, and the timeline never lied. She must have thought my calm meant I was blind or too soft to act. What she never understood was that patience does not mean surrender when someone builds a case carefully. Every deposit slip, every unexplained absence, every public whisper became part of the picture I assembled slowly. By the time she realized I had stopped asking questions, the damage had already been done. I wanted the truth, the whole truth, documented so clearly that no one could twist it later. When the moment finally came, I did not need anger or threats because the paperwork itself carried the full weight of consequences she never believed would come. It started the way storms always start, small changes that seem harmless until patterns emerge. I began noticing receipts in the glove compartment for places we had never been together. There were charges for dinners on nights when she said she was visiting her sister in another part of town. At first, I told myself marriages go through quiet stretches and people need space sometimes. I had learned across deployments that silence does not always mean disaster, but this felt different. She had always been good at small lies dressed as ordinary explanations that disappeared when questioned directly. I started watching without announcing that I was watching because I knew panic would only hide the evidence. The first real crack appeared when a neighbor mentioned a man parked in our driveway on evenings when I was supposed to be working late. That image stayed in my mind like a nail through wood I could not pull free. I began keeping a calendar where I marked every trip, every late return, every unusual purchase she made. The pattern developed slowly, but it developed without gaps, like seeing footprints appear one by one in fresh snow. My military years had taught me to gather facts before acting because facts outlive anger every single time. So I gathered quietly while she laughed with friends online and posted pictures about ordinary life on social media. There was nothing ordinary about the bank withdrawals that never matched the grocery lists she claimed were expensive. She told people I was distant, tired, distracted by work, and maybe I was because I was learning. I was learning how someone can share a house yet live a different life entirely behind closed doors. When she smiled across the dinner table, I started wondering what those smiles had meant anywhere else. The hardest part was pretending I believed everything because I needed time more than I needed confrontation. People reveal themselves when they feel safe, not when they feel cornered or exposed too early. So I stayed calm while she planned weekend trips that left no digital trail except credit card receipts. One afternoon, she claimed her phone had died during errands, but the battery log showed 12 hours online. I kept copies of everything because memory bends under emotion while documents remain steady under any weight you place on them. By the third month, there were hotel charges on our joint account with no business trips on her schedule. She said they were mistakes by the bank, which was true only in the sense that she made them. My patience confused her because she thought questions should come with shouting and breaking things in the driveway. I did not break things because broken things become excuses for sympathy when evidence closes in completely. I wanted the truth to stand on its own legs without needing my anger to carry it. That meant recording dates, names, addresses, transactions, and the timeline of everything she thought would stay hidden forever. Her confidence grew as my questions decreased, because she thought silence meant surrender instead of preparation for something larger. I began visiting a lawyer on lunch breaks while she believed I was working overtime like usual. We built a case with photographs from neighbors, account statements from the bank, and witness letters for court. Every signature we collected carried the weight of calm planning she had mistaken for weakness across those early months. I watched her post pictures with smiling captions while affidavits bearing her name waited inside manila folders downtown. The strange part was how easy it became to act normal when everything no longer surprised me anymore. You stop feeling shock after the third or fourth lie because each one fits the same empty pattern. She began speaking about buying new furniture for spring while I was calculating property divisions with my attorney. That distance between her cheerful plans and my silent preparation felt like standing on opposite edges of a collapsing bridge. By the time the evidence folder grew thick enough to cast a shadow across my desk, I felt nothing. People expect rage or despair when trust breaks, but what comes instead is something colder and far more permanent. It is the understanding that someone burned down a house while smiling across the table each evening, pretending everything was fine. When we finally filed the first set of papers, she still had no idea the walls were already closing. That was when I realized some endings arrive long before anyone sees them, moving quietly like smoke through the beams. She discovered the truth on a Tuesday morning when the first legal notice arrived by courier. I was sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee while she flipped through the envelopes without suspicion. When she reached the one marked with the law firm's letterhead, I saw her face change slowly. The confidence she had carried for months slipped the moment she realized something official had entered our home. She read every page twice before looking at me with confusion that almost hid the first shadow of fear. I had spent weeks preparing for that expression because it meant the silence had finally ended completely. My lawyer said the first blow must be quiet yet undeniable, leaving no space for debate or excuses. That is why the notice included bank statements, photographs, witness letters, and the full timeline attached as exhibits. Each page carried dates, times, signatures, and printed seals that turned suspicion into evidence no one could twist. She stood there holding everything like it might vanish if she closed the folder too quickly or too hard. I kept drinking my coffee because there was nothing left to explain after the paperwork spoke louder than words. For months, she had controlled the story by smiling in public and pretending our marriage remained perfectly ordinary. Now the story had shifted into black and white text, carrying court stamps and notarized witness signatures from 3 different neighbors. She tried calling someone from her phone, but stopped halfway because she realized the evidence could not be erased anymore. The hotel receipts were printed in chronological order beside photographs of vehicles parked outside those same addresses after midnight. Bank withdrawals appeared on dates matching text message records between her and the man she thought stayed invisible forever. My attorney had arranged everything carefully so that no single document carried the whole truth by itself completely. Together, they built a picture even she could not explain away without sounding like someone inventing new lies for old mistakes. I watched her sit down at the table, staring at the folder like it might burn through the wood. She flipped to the pages showing joint account transfers with signatures authorizing funds moved into places I never visited personally. The law firm had prepared certified statements from branch managers confirming dates and identification used during each transaction clearly. Even the messages neighbors overheard had been written into affidavits carrying official seals and witness verification numbers for court. My lawyer told me judges like clean records because emotions fade, but documents remain steady under any questioning at all. That was why I kept silent for months while she laughed in photographs posted online with cheerful captions. She thought silence meant indifference, when it only meant I was gathering facts into something unshakable under scrutiny later. Watching her read everything felt like watching a building collapse slowly after engineers cut through its main supports. She turned pages faster as if speed might undo the weight pressing down from every signature and date recorded. At one point, she closed the folder completely but opened it again because denial breaks when paper carries authority. I remembered the first time she lied about staying late for work while receipts told a different story entirely. Back then, I wondered if I should confront her directly or wait until the pattern became undeniable through repetition. Now the repetition filled 130 pages arranged so tightly even she could not find space for excuses. My attorney called it procedural revenge because nothing inside the folder required shouting or threats to carry consequences forward. He said calm cases win faster because judges see anger as distraction, but documents as undeniable structure holding facts upright. That was why I sat there quietly while she realized everything she thought stayed hidden now belonged to public record. The man she betrayed me with would see his name printed beside hers in the same exhibits repeatedly. Their weekend trips and late-night meetings now carried timestamps verified by 2 separate cell tower reports for accuracy confirmation. She closed the folder again finally, but kept her hand on it like someone holding the edge of a cliff. I knew she wanted to speak, but no words came because the evidence left nothing worth explaining anymore. For months, she believed control belonged to the one who talked the loudest while the quiet man looked away politely. Now she understood control belongs to the one who collects facts patiently until they outweigh every possible version of denial completely. I finished my coffee while she stared at the folder because the next steps no longer belonged to discussion. Court dates would arrive soon, carrying schedules neither of us could ignore or delay with emotional arguments about forgiveness anymore. Watching her face that morning felt like closing the door on a house already burning beyond any chance of repair. Nothing dramatic needed to happen because the paperwork itself carried the weight of finality through every notarized page attached. That was the moment she realized silence does not mean weakness when someone builds a case instead of a scene. The first hearing came faster than either of us expected because my lawyer filed motions immediately after serving notice, and the court schedule opened sooner than usual in our district. I arrived early wearing the same dark suit I had worn to promotions and funerals because this day felt like both at the same time in different ways. She walked in 10 minutes late with the man she thought would stay in the shadows now sitting beside her, looking smaller than he did in the photographs neighbors provided earlier. My attorney told me beforehand that family courts like calm voices and organized records because judges see thousands of angry people every year, but only remember the ones who bring precision instead of drama. That was why every exhibit sat neatly labeled in 3 identical binders prepared for the judge opposing counsel and court clerk, because nothing carries weight like paper arranged with military order in a room built for decisions. When the judge opened the first binder, he paused at the timeline showing dates of hotel receipts beside copies of her messages requesting money transfers from our joint account into places I never visited myself. Opposing counsel tried arguing about relevance, but the judge raised his hand because notarized witness statements carry more weight than speculation when neighbors confirm vehicles parked outside those same hotels during nights matching bank records. Exactly. She kept looking at the man beside her, but he avoided eye contact because every page carried his name next to hers, like signatures carved into wet cement that would harden under the courtroom lights before anyone could erase them. My lawyer presented photographs from our home security camera showing him using our garage code on evenings she claimed she was visiting her sister across town, and the timestamps matched bank withdrawals paying for dinners during those same hours. There was no shouting because paperwork speaks louder when signatures appear in black ink verified by branch managers who testified through written statements submitted before the hearing even began officially. At one point, the judge asked about property division because our house vehicles and joint savings appeared in several exhibits attached to the motion for exclusive use during proceedings. My attorney requested temporary control of the residence, citing unauthorized occupants documented by neighbors' homeowners association complaints and insurance clauses, requiring listed residents for coverage eligibility during pending litigation. Opposing counsel tried objecting until the judge read the homeowners association letters describing loud arguments and damaged landscaping during weekends when I was working overnight shifts documented through my employer's timekeeping system. Submitted separately. She shifted in her chair when the judge granted temporary control of the residence to me pending final division because insurance policies and mortgage agreements list ownership, not weekend guests, as determining factors for legal responsibility. The man beside her whispered something but stopped when the judge reminded everyone that side conversations during testimony violate courtroom procedure and could lead to removal for disrupting official records preserved through audio transcripts. Running continuously. My lawyer then introduced financial statements showing irregular transfers from our joint account into a business account registered under the man's name 2 months after the affair began. According to witness testimony from a restaurant employee who provided dates, receipts, and security footage upon subpoena, opposing counsel requested time to review, but the judge allowed submission because authentication letters from the bank already verified chain of custody for every document attached to the exhibit list filed before the deadline. I watched her expression change when the judge ordered a temporary freeze on remaining joint funds until final accounting could separate marital assets from unauthorized withdrawals, documented through certified transaction histories delivered directly by the bank's legal department earlier that week. People imagine courtrooms filled with shouting threats and dramatic confessions, but reality moves through procedural steps recorded by clerks who mark each exhibit, each ruling, and each objection into transcripts that outlive every emotional outburst ever spoken inside those walls. By midday, the judge scheduled the next hearing for property valuation asset division and potential reimbursement claims depending on final accounting results submitted by both parties within 30 days under financial disclosure rules carrying penalties for incomplete or inaccurate reporting. When we left the courthouse, reporters waited outside because someone leaked filings mentioning unauthorized transfers linked to a local business partially owned by the man sitting beside her, avoiding cameras now circling the steps leading down toward the parking lot. I walked past quietly because documents, not interviews, decide outcomes, and the next hearing would arrive soon, carrying more records heavier than anything spoken into microphones flashing under the afternoon sun, waiting for sound bites that never mattered inside court transcripts preserved longer than headlines. The weeks before the second hearing felt like marching through heavy rain carrying a pack filled with bricks, because every day brought new disclosures stacked higher on my attorney's conference table until the weight formed a wall around everything I thought marriage meant before this began. Property valuations arrived first, showing market estimates for the house we bought together during better years, when fresh paint and new furniture felt like investments instead of future exhibits marked for division under court supervision, with neutral appraisers signing every page like witnesses at a funeral. Financial investigators submitted reports tracing each transfer from our joint account into destinations tied to her companion, including one business account already flagged for irregular tax filings long before our case reached any courtroom, because numbers tell stories even when people try rewriting them afterward with trembling voices and late apologies. My lawyer highlighted sections showing unauthorized withdrawals, paying for travel expenses, restaurant bills, and short-term rentals booked under names matching neither mine nor hers, but linked through payment methods carrying our joint signatures. Across every digital receipt stored by banks indifferent to excuses delivered months too late. Opposing counsel requested delays, claiming complexity, but the judge refused because certified records leave little space for speculation. When auditors attach spreadsheets listing dates, amounts, account holders, and verification stamps from 3 separate institutions preserving chain of custody like military supply logs written in permanent ink. Meanwhile, neighbors submitted additional affidavits describing unfamiliar vehicles parked outside our home during weekends. I worked overtime documented through employer schedules already filed alongside mortgage statements, insurance policies, and homeowners association complaints about noise, trash violations, and unauthorized occupants violating community bylaws requiring owner presence for overnight guests exceeding 3 consecutive days. Each affidavit carried notarized signatures because truth requires structure when emotions collapse under competing narratives spoken through clenched teeth outside courthouse steps, where reporters kept waiting for comments none of us provided, since transcripts, not headlines, decide property boundaries, bank reimbursements, and final orders signed beneath state seals heavier than microphones chasing afternoon drama. The man she chose avoided every hearing after the first because subpoenas mentioning potential financial liability appeared inside court records once investigators confirmed business accounts receiving transfers originating from our joint savings, opened years before his name entered conversations whispered across fences and text messages. Neighbors forwarded under oath with timestamps matching bank withdrawals, dollar for dollar, until coincidence collapsed into patterns judges recognize. Instantly, after decades watching stories like ours unravel inside identical walls painted government beige, my attorney prepared reimbursement claims listing each unauthorized withdrawal plus interest calculated under state statutes covering marital assets diverted without consent during periods documented through witness statements, photographs, security footage, and digital logs forming timelines thicker than phone books stacked across conference tables smelling of toner, paper dust, and burnt coffee from late nights assembling consequences page by page until silence felt louder than any argument she might attempt beneath fluorescent lights humming above courtroom benches polished by decades of restless hands gripping edges while waiting for rulings ending. Chapters people once believed would last forever. When opposing counsel reviewed discovery files, their objections shrank because bank officers, tax investigators, and property appraisers rarely invent signatures, dates, or transaction chains preserved across multiple systems converging toward identical conclusions, resistant to cross-examination except through vague suggestions about misunderstandings dissolving instantly when confronted with receipts carrying matching verification codes stamped by institutions existing long before our marriage, began unraveling inside manila folders labeled alphabetically for judges preferring order over emotion every single time. By the time the second hearing opened, the judge had already reviewed preliminary valuations, reimbursement claims, and financial disclosures delivered under certification penalties, carrying fines for omissions, false statements, or delayed submissions, because court schedules demand precision, not excuses when dividing assets, debts, and liabilities between parties, whose arguments collapse once records replace accusations, repeating through corridors where clerks roll carts stacked with evidence, thicker than dictionaries pushed toward courtrooms waiting for proceedings measured through procedures lasting longer than tempers fraying under weight. Neither side controls after filings enter dockets archived beyond reach of revision or regret. That morning, she sat 2 rows behind opposing counsel, clutching a folder thinner than the binders my attorney carried because preparation builds walls thicker than apologies arriving after deadlines expire, leaving consequences shaped by signatures, dates, and seals. Neither anger nor charm can bend once orders leave chambers carrying finality heavier than vows spoken years earlier beneath ceilings that never warned how silence sometimes breaks inside courtrooms colder than rain falling across. Parking lots emptying slowly after hearings ending marriages through pages. Not voices, because paper never forgets what people prefer leaving unsaid until too late. The second hearing began under gray skies that matched the courthouse walls. Nothing about property division carries warmth once lawyers replace conversations between spouses who once shared dinner tables. Now everything moved through conference folders stacked taller than coffee cups, cooling beside legal pads filled with calculations about equity percentages, mortgage balances, insurance reimbursements, and account freezes stretching backward across. Years of financial statements. Numbers lined up like marching columns carrying quiet verdicts, heavier than any raised voices drifting occasionally from hallways where other couples waited for hearings, measuring the remains of homes, careers, and promises against statutes written. Without sympathy for anniversaries, birthdays, or photographs smiling from exhibits marked with case numbers instead of captions. My attorney opened with financial ledgers tracing every unauthorized withdrawal from joint savings into accounts controlled solely by her companion. His absence from proceedings no longer prevented the judge from reviewing tax records, bank statements, and transaction receipts, forming timelines impossible to dismiss. Certified accountants signed each page beneath penalty clauses, explaining perjury consequences without emotion or hesitation. Because numbers, unlike people, rarely argue about intentions when deposits match hotel invoices, rental agreements, and restaurant bills dated across weekends I spent documented through employer logs, flight itineraries, and training rosters proving locations miles away from places she claimed. Witness letters described vehicles parked overnight outside properties, rented under names appearing beside hers on digital receipts subpoenaed from booking companies. These companies answered court orders with electronic archives immune to disappearing messages, phones wiped in panic, or explanations rewritten after patterns hardened into sequences judges recognize instantly from years watching similar betrayals. Follow identical shapes, differing only in names, addresses, and account balances, draining silently until discovery requests froze everything behind protective orders. Assets now sat locked under court supervision, where neither spouse moved dollars without permission, recorded through clerks filing orders beneath fluorescent lights, buzzing above hallways smelling of dust, paper, coffee, and anxiety carried inside. Briefcases heavier leaving courtrooms than entering. Evidence multiplies faster than denials once accountants attach spreadsheets mapping transfers, arrows, dates, initials, and signatures into diagrams reducing marriages to financial autopsies, labeling cause, manner, and time of death with precision. Funeral directors might envy if they handled numbers instead of bodies lowered under rain, falling as steadily as motions, rulings, and stamped orders sliding across polished benches toward attorneys, gathering pages shaping futures neither spouse. Imagine during wedding receptions when signatures felt ceremonial instead of binding like chains, tightening decades later across property lines, bank ledgers, and insurance clauses, judges enforce with pens moving slower than seconds stretching. Through rooms silent except for shuffling paper heavier than accusations. Emotions carry no weight beside certified statements explaining balances, interest, penalties, and reimbursement calculations advancing across exhibits until amounts diverted without consent returned through liens, wage garnishments, or asset. Reallocations, reversing transfers documented by accountants, handwriting dates beside transactions, highlighted for judges preferring order over chaos, restraint over outrage, and documentation over memories described by spouses remembering differently, until receipts, timestamps, and surveillance footage silence revisions through precision stripping narratives down to numbers. Neither side controls once court reporters type transcripts preserving every objection, ruling, and calculation beyond. Settlements collapsing when discovery reveals gaps between explanations and documents stacked until opposing counsel stops contesting amounts, interest rates, or deadlines appearing inside orders scheduled for enforcement hearings arriving. Automatically, if balances remain unpaid. Past dates, judges underline twice before handing copies to clerks, stamping seals audible across rooms, holding silence thicker than walls separating strangers who once shared bedrooms, now divided by exhibits. Measuring years of purchases, vacations, renovations, and investments reduced to figures scrolling across projection screens, while lawyers calculate equity splits, debt assumptions, and retirement account offsets through formulas written into statutes ignoring anniversaries, holidays, or reasons. Mathematics cares nothing about betrayal except amounts transferred, interest accrued, and penalties triggered by withdrawals, purchases, or wire transfers explained too late after evidence leaves no space for revision, regret, or persuasion once. Accountants authenticate signatures, initials, routing numbers, and confirmation codes, painting pictures clearer than witnesses, neighbors, or relatives describing arguments, slammed doors, or late returns. These become irrelevant beside ledgers proving timelines, motives, and opportunities without speaking, describing affairs, expenditures, and deceptions silently through balances, decimals, and interest rates judges read without expression before. Announcing divisions, reimbursements, and transfers scheduled under enforcement provisions carrying consequences beyond hearings, ending under skies clearing slowly above parking lots where reporters waited again. Names, dates, amounts, and orders belonged now to records stored longer than stories fading faster than ink, drying across signatures, closing chapters through mathematics, colder than betrayal, yet heavier than grief, because numbers, unlike people, never lie, forget, or forgive once written into judgments archived beyond appeals, surviving memories, families, or reasons offered too late beneath ceilings. Hearing everything, yet remembering nothing except pages stacked higher each month until cases close, doors echo, and footsteps fade. The final hearing felt quieter than all the others. Everything left had already been measured through spreadsheets, witness statements, and account balances, leaving no space for arguments. Property divisions, reimbursements, and account freezes turned into final orders signed beneath seals heavier than voices fading across hallways. Months of motions, filings, and hearings stretched longer than our marriage survived its own silence. Numbers replaced promises through rulings describing assets divided, funds returned, and liens attached to future earnings. Unauthorized transfers disappeared from ledgers carrying his name beside hers across exhibits stacked higher than memories. Fluorescent lights glared above, while judges read calculations like weather reports predicting consequences arriving whether anyone spoke or not. Paper, not anger, decided outcomes archived beyond appeals, gathering dust thicker than regret across files marked closed. Clerks rolled carts of evidence back into rooms waiting for other families, other names, and other stories ending the same. When the orders became final, the house keys, account transfers, and reimbursement schedules passed through lawyers' hands without ceremony. Endings never arrive with the same noise beginnings carry when people still believe nothing can break what they build together across years, now reduced to signatures, deadlines, and enforcement clauses listing dates beside balances. Promises turned into payment schedules signed by judges reading calculations like weather forecasts predicting storms already overhead. She packed boxes under timelines marked in court filings, leaving furniture divided through valuation sheets appraisers signed weeks earlier. Numbers replaced memories with bullet points describing equity splits, lien attachments, and account freezes lifting only after funds cleared through channels clerks monitored silently. Enforcement orders leave nothing for debate once stamped beneath seals heavier than explanations arriving too late for hearings already closed. Futures moved forward through paperwork stacked higher than anything spoken across rooms emptied slowly after consequences settled without applause or anger, only finality stretching longer than regret. After the last hearing ended, the house felt different even before she removed the last box. Silence settled heavier than any argument ever had, filling rooms stripped of photographs, furniture, and the ordinary noise marriage used to carry before ledgers and exhibits replaced conversations about plans, vacations, or repairs postponed until next summer when we still believed time worked in our favor. Court orders moved faster than emotions, dividing accounts, freezing assets, and assigning deadlines through dates printed in black ink beside interest calculations. Auditors verified twice before clerks filed everything beneath case numbers archived. Longer than memories survive. Furniture left, locks changed, and neighbors stopped asking questions they already guessed answers for when process servers arrived months earlier, carrying envelopes heavier than suspicion. Signatures, not rumors, decide endings nobody celebrates when silence replaces accusations, deadlines replace anniversaries, and houses once shared become addresses listed inside judgments, read aloud before rooms emptied without applause or forgiveness. I stayed in the house after everything ended, because court orders left it under my name alone. The mortgage, the taxes, and the memories felt less like comfort and more like evidence packed into walls stripped bare of photographs, furniture, and her perfume fading slowly from the hallway near the bedroom door. She closed it for the last time, carrying boxes labeled by rooms divided on spreadsheets printed during the second hearing, where lawyers read valuations like weather reports predicting storms measured through bank balances, appraisal numbers, and insurance clauses colder than any argument we ever had. Dates, signatures, and seals turned marriage into paperwork processed by clerks moving faster than feelings ever could, while neighbors pretended they had not watched months of depositions, filings, and envelopes delivered by couriers walking up the same driveway. Wedding guests once carried gifts wrapped in silver paper for a couple believing promises outlast courtrooms, deadlines, and judgments stamped heavier than regret settling into empty rooms after everyone left. Weeks passed after the final hearing, and the silence inside the house changed slowly. It was no longer sharp like it had been when boxes left and locks turned, but heavy in a quieter way, like a closing door that no longer slammed because everything behind it had already been settled. Pages stamped with seals and signatures carried more weight than any argument spoken across years ending inside courtrooms. Judges read numbers dividing furniture, savings, and equity with the same tone used for hundreds of other families. Endings do not arrive with shouting. They arrive with clerks filing orders beneath fluorescent lights while lawyers gather their briefcases. Neighbors watch from porches, pretending they had not heard the rumors proven through bank statements, affidavits, and receipts, stacked high enough to leave nothing worth debating. Deadlines passed, accounts transferred, and houses once shared became addresses printed on envelopes carrying names no longer written together anywhere except marriage certificates archived deeper than anyone will ever read again. After the judgments were filed, life moved forward in ways that felt both fast and strangely empty. Nothing dramatic followed the signatures, the stamps, and the deadlines now marked as complete inside court records stored beyond reach of edits or appeals. The reimbursements arrived through scheduled transfers processed by banks, carrying reference numbers tied to orders printed in black ink beneath the same seals dividing furniture, accounts, and equity months earlier. Arguments stopped mattering once spreadsheets replaced conversations about futures planned in better years. Neighbors eventually stopped watching the driveway where couriers once delivered envelopes heavier than suspicion, and the house settled into a quieter routine shaped by paperwork closing chapters without ceremony or explanation. Her companion disappeared from sight after his name appeared inside exhibits listing unauthorized transfers, now repaid through amounts deducted automatically without discussion. Enforcement orders speak louder than excuses, leaving nothing behind except balances corrected, locks changed, and rooms staying silent long after deadlines passed. When the last payment cleared, the case closed quietly because enforcement schedules ended without delays, extensions, or appeals, waiting on signatures that never came since everything owed had been calculated months earlier by accountants and approved by judges reading numbers instead of listening to arguments fading after deadlines passed, leaving no space for explanations or apologies arriving too late to matter. The house stayed under my name alone. The accounts balanced again under orders carrying seals heavier than wedding vows archived now beside files. No one opens once courts finish dividing what lives built together before spreadsheets, affidavits, and valuation reports replaced anniversaries, plans, and photographs stored in boxes she carried away during weekends scheduled through agreements written in the same neutral language judges use when finality replaces emotion inside rooms where endings arrive through paperwork instead of shouting, leaving silence across hallways echoing after clerks wheel carts of exhibits back toward storage deeper than anyone ever visits again. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city are you watching? 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 Are you watching?